How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today's video we're going to be talking about the new player experience and what people wanting to play World of Tanks console will face when they come onto the game. We're going to give a few criticisms and definitely give our opinion as to the new player experience. I've made a separate account that I've played on for a couple of seasons, and we'll get right into exactly what you can expect in the game. Now, you can obviously see by the tanks in my garage that they are primarily premium tanks. Obviously that's because that's what the game is now. You know, even on my main account I have majority premium tanks. That's just because they're giving them away like it's candy, and they're basically giving them away via the season pass. There's like 4 tanks that you can pick up every single season pass on average, and also you've got the chance of getting premium tanks out of key cards and various different other things, along with being able to earn gold in the game has meant that you can actually purchase premium tanks as well, and it's kind of a bit less rewarding being able to play in your premium tanks now, since everyone and their dog is playing in them. Now, the first thing that you want to do when you actually come onto the game is your commanders. You won't have any. There will be 0 commanders in your garage unless you started the game once and you did have a commander from the previous system in the game. If you want multiple commanders from multiple nations, then guess what? You're going to have to either buy the purchase the season pass, which is going to cost you 2,000 gold, and it's going to be the thing that I would definitely recommend first if you're going to spend any money on the game. In order to be able to really even play, I'd recommend purchasing the season pass. It's not an endorsement by Wargaming. This is literally in order to pretty much play this free game. The commanders themselves will cost you, if you want to recruit any commander in the game, it will cost you 500,000 silver, or you can just buy them from the store, which they often do some bundles where you can actually just pick up some commanders. The commanders that you can pick up in the store are just ridiculous price. 6,000 gold for some commanders is actually a joke. If we're going to be really honest, you know, you only pick up 6 commanders, they're costing 1,000 gold each. Ridiculous. Definitely something that I wouldn't recommend to any of you. I mean, you can convert gold into silver, which is a silly idea. You'd just be better off buying a premium tank or purchasing the season pass, getting up the ranks, and then getting one of the commanders that is part of the season pass at rank 50, Creighton Abrams, as the commander that you want to use. Obviously, when you get up to rank 75, you get a premium tank where you'll start earning silver yourself, and then you can start purchasing commanders from there. Basically, everything is fueling you down the season pass route. When you first start in, everything costs silver. You have literally none. Your first level on the season pass will give you 100,000 silver. You'll get something like 3.5 million silver over the course of the season pass if you complete it to level 100, which, to be honest, is a decent amount that you'll be able to use to be able to pick up various different things. But when you couple that with the fact that all of the veteran players in the game are going to be firing at premium ammunition, which is these rounds down here, they basically have an increase in silver cost of, like, you know, this one is 4.8 times the price pretty much. It gives you way better penetration in game, which means that you can go through the armor of enemy tanks so much easier, and it's kind of like Wargaming's pay to win kind of aspect of the game. Although it's not directly pay to win because you can earn silver in game just through playing, it does mean that in the majority of situations, if you're firing premium rounds as the majority of rounds, you're going to be losing silver in game. If you don't have any silver on your account and you're losing silver every game, you cannot play. Now, if you want to then gain silver, you either have to purchase a premium tank where you can actually fire premium ammunition completely in it and still make credits, either buy a premium account where you'll earn more credits than before in terms of silver, and then you could also purchase silver from the store. You know, it's very much driving you to purchase the ammunition and anything that is in the game that costs silver with your actual money. Now, would I ever recommend doing this? Absolutely not. I think there's far better ways to actually purchase or get silver, and that is in the form of premium account time. This is probably the one thing in World of Tanks that is actually the most worth it. It's never worth purchasing at full price. I'm going to say that just to be clear. but it definitely is worth getting on Black Friday. They tend to do a 50% off, which means that for 360 days it's approximately 12,000 gold, or sometimes it's like 45% off and stuff like that. But buying it on discount is the way to go, and definitely buying the biggest bundle is the best way to go too. Now, what will that cost you in terms of your real money? If you want to go into pounds, it's going to cost you around £35 for the year. Now, this is definitely the biggest thing that's worth it in the game, other than the season pass, which you manage to get the gold back if you just get to rank 100. That you can do that by basically playing and completing the season challenges. Now, you'll see that I have the King Tiger in my account. That was from the previous season, and right now you can see just how quickly you can complete the season pass. Now, if we have a look at how many games I've played on this account, I've played 50 in the S35. If we call it 30, 25, you're looking at 55, 100 games, 120 games, and if we look at the sold tanks, you're probably looking at, let's say, 200 games. What have I got from 200 games of playing, do you say? Well, I've got a tier 10, I've got 2 tier 8 premiums, and I've got a tier 9. From playing 200 games of World of Tanks, I've got all of those. What does that mean? A lot of the new players are going to be boosted up the ranks and the tiers into the top tier of matchmaking. This is where most of the veterans play. It's the kind of the most competitive tiers, tier 8 to tier 10, are where the majority of skilled players will be playing comparatively to the low tiers. I mean, obviously you get the exception of some of those T67 players that for some reason have fun just knocking out opponents at tier 5, but you can certainly be coming up against people that have played the game for a lot longer than you, and if you've been playing 200 games and you're coming up against someone with 20,000 games, it's not going to be fun for you. I think the new player experience on this game is terrible. I think that they've done very little in terms of trying to improve that. I think they've generated all of these new players by introducing Update 6.0, doing a massive revamp. You've got all of the different seasons of World of Tanks console, you've got modern tanks coming, but the actual systems in place to retain those players are just not there. Like, what is fun about just getting removed every single game, by players that just know the mechanics more? There's no sort of introduction to this game, to be honest. I mean, there is a little bit, but there's very little explanation. A lot of people are going to have to go onto YouTube if they want to find out what's actually going on with their game, what the best perks are, what the skills they should be looking at getting are. They're starting off with one skill crews, which is not fun. They're going to have to take multiple times more to be able to get their commanders upgraded, because obviously when you first start a game you're not going to be the best player, and so it's going to take you a lot longer to get your commander XP, because it is based on performance in games. And so if you're having worse performance than, say, someone with 20,000 games, it's going to be a lot harder for you to train up these crews. That's going to make it even more of a grind to get better at the game. You've got this massive disadvantage, because if I'm running the Object 777 with 4 crew skills, I'm missing some really vital ones in there. So when I come up against an opponent, it's definitely going to be their advantage flat out. There's no way of me actually being able to do anything to them if they're exactly the same skill level. Now, I'm not saying that everything should be at the new player's advantage, but there certainly isn't enough kind of ways for people to actually get better in the game, and I feel like a lot more guides, tutorial systems and things need to be in the game. Maybe even come out with like the old War Stories mode where it's PvE, allows players to kind of get a better understanding, pushes you towards learning the core game mechanics, which aren't at all obvious. The whole spotting mechanic, people saying that they're getting hit by invisible tanks, it's very bad for the game in general, in terms of, you've annoyed some of the veteran players who have already left the game. You're then forcing new players into a game where there's not enough systems for them to learn, and they're having to go onto YouTube, which, let's be honest, if you picked up a free game and you're having to go onto YouTube just to know how to play it, you're probably not going to carry on with that game, or not that many people are even going to venture onto YouTube or Twitch or whatever sort of platform they're going to have a look at outside, externally to World of Tanks console. So I think that is really key if they're trying to keep the players and the player base in this game. I mean, if we look at some of the tech trees as well, you're needing a lot of XP to be able to progress. To get a tier 10 fully researched is on average probably looking at around 850,000 XP for the majority of them, some of them costing nearly 1 million XP to be able to get. That's a lot of games for people to grind down, and it's kind of that incentive where they could complete the season pass, which is going to take a lot less time to be able to do that than it is to grind up a tier 10 line. So what they're going to do, they're going to complete the season pass and then they're only going to play the season pass tanks. Kind of ruins the matchmaker a little bit in terms of what tanks everyone's seeing, the diversity. It means that new players don't actually know what some of the old tanks actually play like, because all they're coming up against is the same ones, which means that the player base is actually losing experience in terms of coming up against, when they do actually come up against players that are more experienced in these different tanks than they're used to. They just don't have the skill to be able to deal with them, when they could have easily dealt with them before in terms of more skilled players playing at tier 10, and also having this idea and knowledge system that was already in the game in the form of war stories for new players anyway. Now, I know that they do have hints on the screen when we have a look, but they just aren't good enough. It kind of tells you about penetration indicators, but for the majority of the time, they're not actually that useful. I certainly don't really look at them when I'm actually looking at a tank. That's probably because I know what the weak points are of the enemy tanks, but that isn't easy to know to begin with. Maybe having an effective armor viewer would actually be better in the game. I find that this system right here is just completely rubbish. I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to hold back on this. This is pretty boring, it's useless. It doesn't really show you very much. It tells you what the armor thickness on the front is. It doesn't take into account angling. So yeah, you might have 50mm of armor that is flat, but the 36mm plate that is actually well angled is going to be more effective armor, and so it just doesn't work in terms of showing what people actually want in the game. So I would 100% move this from a standard model that they've got here into a live model where it shows what the effective armor actually is for a tank. So being able to have it a dynamic armor viewer would be really, really helpful for new players to see what the effective angling is in their tank, which is a big thing, and I've covered that in a few guides and stuff like that, especially for heavy tanks and tanks that are heavily armoured on the side. For tank destroyers and weakly armoured tanks, it's not really that applicable, but it's something that should be in the game and should definitely be able for players to have a look at, to learn what kind of weak points the tanks actually are, because sometimes, although it is the weakest or like a weaker part of the tank, because it's angled, it might actually be far stronger than the other areas of the tank. That's just one thing that could be implemented, but it just seems like the focus has gone away from keeping players. It's just about getting new players constantly streaming in and paying $10 for the season pass, playing up until level 40. They get bored, they leave the game, and they don't come back. I just really hope that kind of idea just stops, and that Wargaming try and invest a little bit of their time and development into some more tutorial systems, into actually giving the players something to enable them to retain on the game, because that really isn't happening right now. And I'm feeling like every single update, the player base skill knowledge, things like the cap circles, people don't know that you can actually reset the timer on the cap circle if you just damage the opponent in the cap circle, or even just damage the modules of someone in the cap circle. I always shoot at the tracks or fire HE at anyone in the cap circle, which means that our team will have that chance to be able to come back, especially if I'm the only one near the cap circle. So I've found a lot of games are being lost because of that. Something like a tutorial system is always needed in this sort of game, where it's very hot off the heels. When you into the game, you're in the thick of it. People don't really have that much of an opportunity to learn from the game, and I think that is really essential in order to reduce that learning curve and make people just a bit more aware of what the sort of things they can do in the game to have a better effect. and to get better, and the ways that they can do that. That will effectively allow players to get better at the game. It will allow them to feel like they're being rewarded for learning the game. That's a key thing in World of Tanks. If you're being rewarded for learning the game, you're going to feel like you want to play and spend a little bit more time. And I just think that for the majority of players now, that isn't the case. Even some of the veterans are now finding it a little bit boring because of the skill level of enemy opponents. I mean, it's not particularly fun when you get in an engagement when you're just completely demolishing the opposition tank that you're fighting, because let's be honest, it's fun when you get into a bit of a competition between someone that's good and someone that's also good, and you're fighting it out, brawling it, and it's a case of who knows the mechanics better. Now it's just a case of, did I come up against someone that's played 200 games, or am I coming up against someone that's played 50,000 games? You know, it just becomes like a ruffle stomp on the people that just haven't played enough, and they don't have the crew perks, they don't have the equipment, they don't have the consumables, they don't have the extra things that make you infinitely better in the game and just have that advantage. And I think that you know, some more tutorials and that is never a bad idea. Other than that, that's the focus of today's video, is just talking a little bit about the new player experience, trying to emphasise to Wargaming that you need to be working on this as well as whatever you're doing with regards to bringing in new tanks, new game modes, new tank lines, various different premium tanks that you're focusing on. You also do need to focus on the ability for new players to learn the game, and that's going to keep them on your game, that's going to keep them wanting to pay money for the new content that comes out. Because let's be honest, if you bring out a new content but there's only 100 players left, the only maximum amount of players that can buy that content is 100 players, and let's be honest, your probably ratio of being able to purchase new content is probably not that high. It's probably something in the region of 5 to 10% of players purchase the brand new content that you release. So make sure that you don't mess about with the player base too much, and you actually try and inform them as to the best decisions that they can make in game, and so that they can have more fun. Because if a game isn't fun, they're going to leave, they're going to go somewhere else. And me personally, I'm thinking about moving towards PC just because I'm not liking the direction that console are going in right now. Other than that, guys, I hope you guys did find the video informative. If you want to check out some more content on the channel, there will be videos on screen talking about the most recent update news, and also my thoughts on the whole new game mode coming into World of Tanks console, and what I think that's going to be like for the future of World of Tanks console. Other than that, I hope you guys have a really good rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.